Okay, so continuing on with writing about your degree of certainty for the findings that you've discovered. If you're fairly certain, you can say things like recent studies confirm. That would be a good way of expressing that. If you're rather uncertain, you might say something like, although this single study is methodologically sound and confirms blank, more evidence is required. If you're very uncertain, you could, be clear about the fact that, well, this is just one single pilot study and it suggests, the word suggests, is not a particularly strong word. So, and this slide again, these examples are Dr. Susan Fraser's. I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. But this is important because we don't want to over or undersell our evidence. Some more general tips. Begin every paragraph with a topic sentence. Now, we've talked a little bit about that earlier in the tutorial. Every main idea needs a topic sentence, and then every other sentence in that paragraph should develop that topic sentence. So you should hold your paragraphs to that standard. When you're reading through your first draft, play the Sesame Street game of one of these things is not like the other. And if you have a sentence in a paragraph that seems like it would qualify for that it's sticking out, doesn't really relate to the rest of the sentences in the paragraph, it doesn't really do much to develop the topic sentence, then it's got to go. It's got to go in a different paragraph, or it's got to be cut from the paper. It's also good to use transitions to guide readers logically from idea to idea, and those transitions can sometimes just be one word, like a word like however, or a word like therefore, a phrase like for example. Those are transition words and phrases, and sometimes you need transition sentences, and we looked at, of course, earlier an example of a transition sentence, and it's very important because it smooths out the logical trajectory from one idea to the next. It smooths the path from one idea to the next, and it really makes your paper much more readable and easy to understand. Lastly, you want to give yourself plenty of time to revise, experiment, and edit. So you do not want to be writing this paper the night before it's due, the night before your deadline. I'm as big a procrastinator as anybody, but it's a bad idea because a manuscript has to ripen. You have to give yourself time to engage in the thinking process of writing. Writing is not just about the finished product. It's actually a creative process in itself, and you will have ideas while you're writing and while you're revising that you would never have otherwise. So give yourself time as much as you can and work on developing a writing process that works for you. So let's review what we've learned. In a literature review, it's crucial to synthesize rather than summarizing. This means that we're not going to go study by study in our findings section. We're going to go finding by finding instead. We're not going author by author. We're going finding by finding, or theme by theme. Think about the bird's eye view. Think about the big picture. If you were riding in an elevator with me from the first floor of a skyscraper up to the 20th floor, and you only had that length of time to sum up for me everything that we know from this body of literature, you couldn't go study by study. You don't have time. So just give me the broad strokes. What would you tell me? And that is what we're doing in a literature review. Remember the iceberg analogy. What you've read is the biggest part of the iceberg under the water that the reader will never see. There's a lot of detail about each individual study that's not going to be included in the actual text. What you're writing is just the little bit that sticks up at the top. So remember also to address the strengths and weaknesses of your included articles. There are, as I said earlier, guidelines for that. Ignore the line about the readings. This is from when I was teaching a course in this. But those are both good books. And again, the Pan book is called Preparing Literature Reviews, I think, something like that. But it's by M. Ling Pan. It's a second edition. It's a terrific book. And the other one is called Writing for Publication in Nursing, and it's by Orman and Hayes, and it has a wonderful chapter on writing lit reviews. Really good advice. So if you are writing a lit review, you might want to check out those two books. It's also important to address the so what question, to address the implications of the findings. So what next? What are the gaps in the literature? What don't we know? What questions still remain that future researchers could answer? What does all this mean for practice? What does it all mean for further research? What can and should your readers do with this information? Because remember, the whole point of writing a literature review is to have something to act upon, whether that's to make a study of your own, to answer some of the questions and fill some of the gaps in the research, or whether that's to make a practice change because we have enough evidence and strong enough evidence to suggest that that would be a good idea. Whatever your purpose, there's a very practical purpose of a literature review, and it's important to address that. It's very important. So here is my references list, so credited all the sources that I used. I'll leave that up for you for a moment if you want to look up any of these books. And I hope this has been helpful to everybody. And as always, happy scribbling. Bye.